Imagine being locked up in the same cell as Katherine Knight, the infamous Australian cannibal, or Eileen Wuornos, the notorious serial killer. These women not only struck fear in society, but also instilled terror within prison walls. In this video, we explore the lives of the most feared women in prison, delving into their chilling stories and the reign of terror they maintained behind bars. Krista Pike. In a maximum security prison, there's a power hierarchy among inmates. At the top is Krista Gale Pike, known for her terrifying crimes. Born on March 10, 1976 in West Virginia, Krista had a rough childhood marked by her parents' divorce and frequent moves, leading her to drop out of high school. At 18, Krista joined the Job Corps, a government program for troubled youth, in Knoxville, Tennessee. There, her life took a dark turn. In January 1995, Krista, her boyfriend Tadaril Shipp, and her friend Shadola Peterson committed a gruesome crime. They lured Colleen Slemmer, another Job Corps student, to a secluded area, pretending to offer peace. Driven by jealousy, Krista believed Colleen was trying to steal her boyfriend. For 30 minutes, they brutally beat and murdered Colleen. Krista even took a piece of Colleen's skull as a trophy. This savage act shocked the nation and led to Krista's quick arrest. Convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, Krista became notorious in the Tennessee prison for women. Her crime and violent behavior made her a feared figure. In March 2004, her reputation grew when she and another inmate, Natasha Cornett, were involved in an attempted murder plot against another prisoner. This incident showed Krista's ongoing capacity for violence, even under strict prison surveillance. Krista's interactions with prison staff have also been problematic. She has received numerous infractions for not following rules and being aggressive, often resulting in solitary confinement. These actions reinforced her dangerous image, making it clear she is hard to manage. To manage Krista, the prison takes specific security measures, though details are kept confidential. These measures likely include regular checks, controlled movement, and solitary confinement to prevent harm. Staff are trained in de-escalation techniques and crisis intervention, receiving support to handle the stress of overseeing high-risk inmates like Krista. However, since her 1996 conviction, Krista has been involved in numerous legal proceedings and appeals. Her case drew a lot of attention because she is one of the youngest women sentenced to death in the US. Her defense team has filed many appeals, arguing she had mental health issues at the time of the crime, which was not properly considered, and that her original defense was ineffective. In 2000, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed her conviction but found errors in the sentencing phase. However, they concluded these errors did not warrant overturning her death sentence. Despite these legal challenges, Krista remains on death row. She remains a central, feared figure in the Tennessee prison for women. Next, we have the story of the sweet-looking grandma who was a cold-hearted poisoner. Velma Barfield. In the shadowed halls of Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, a chilling presence haunted even the toughest inmates. Velma Barfield, who looked like a sweet grandmother, was known as the most feared woman in prison. Her life began in the rural town of Eastover, North Carolina, on October 29, 1932. Raised near Fayetteville, young Velma's childhood was marked by her father's abuse, while her mother, Lillian Bullard, remained silent. Seeking escape, Velma married Thomas Burke in 1949. They had 2 children and a brief period of happiness. However, after a hysterectomy and chronic back pain, Velma became addicted to drugs. This addiction tore their household apart. Thomas turned to alcohol, leading to frequent arguments and a broken home. In this chaos, Velma's dark transformation began. On April 4, 1969, a fire engulfed their home, killing Thomas, who was passed out from drinking. Suspicion surrounded Velma, but no charges were brought against her. Left as a single mother, Velma sought stability and soon married Jennings Barfield in 1970. Yet, Jennings died of heart complications on March 22, 1971, less than a year after their marriage, deepening the shadow of doubt. By 1974, Velma's criminal activities escalated. Her mother, Lillian Bullard, died on December 30, 1974, from mysterious ailments similar to Jennings. She also began caring for the elderly, and more deaths followed. Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, Record Lee and Roland Stewart Taylor all died under suspicious circumstances with Velma nearby. Taylor's death on February 3, 1978, from arsenic poisoning finally led to her arrest. Velma Barfield's trial for the murder of Roland Stewart Taylor captivated North Carolina. The prosecution depicted her as a cold-hearted poisoner, while the defense tried to portray her as a woman broken by abuse and addiction. Velma confessed to killing her mother, Dolly Edwards, and John Henry Lee. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. On November 2, 1984, Velma Barfield became the first woman executed by lethal injection in the US since the 1970s reinstatement of capital punishment. Her final statement expressed remorse, and her last meal was simply cheese doodles and Coca-Cola. Next up is the Angel of Death, who struck fear into the hearts of many. Genene Jones. In the quiet halls of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, whispers about Janine Jones still haunt the inmates. Known as the Angel of Death, Jones was a nurse whose hands brought death instead of healing. Janine Jones was born on July 13, 1950, in Texas. Adopted by a nightclub owner and his wife, her early life seemed ordinary. She worked as a beautician before deciding to pursue nursing in the late 1970s. Jones married her high school sweetheart in 1968, had a child, divorced in 1974, and then rekindled the relationship, having another child in 1977. However, her personal life was chaotic, ending in a brief marriage to a 19-year-old nursing assistant just before her indictment. Jones started working at Bexar County Hospital's Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, where she was responsible for the most vulnerable patients. A disturbing number of children died under her care, but the hospital, fearing a scandal, quietly asked her and other licensed vocational nurses, LVNs, to resign. Jones moved on to a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, where children again experienced sudden, unexplained medical crises. A turning point came when a doctor found a tampered vial of succinylcholine, a powerful paralytic agent. The puncture marks on the vial suggested misuse. Jones claimed she wanted to establish a pediatric intensive care unit in Kerrville, but her actions indicated a darker motive. She injected children with drugs that could stop their hearts and paralyze their lungs. Authorities began an investigation, uncovering the extent of Jones's crimes. The Angel of Death had harmed and possibly killed dozens of children. In 1985, Jones was found guilty of murdering 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan with a lethal injection of succinylcholine and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. She faced additional charges for harming other children, including Brandy Benitez, Chris Parker, Jimmy Pearson, Misty Reichenau, and Jacob Evans. Jones's potential early release due to a Texas law aimed at reducing prison overcrowding alarmed many. In 2017, just before her possible release, she was indicted for the murder of 11-month-old Joshua Sawyer. This move ensured she would remain behind bars. In 2020, Jones pleaded guilty to Sawyer's murder, receiving a life sentence with no parole chance until age 87. Following this is the chilling story of a mother who killed her children. Mary Beth Tinning. Mary Beth Tinning's story is one of the most chilling in criminal history. Born on September 11, 1942, in Duanesburg, New York, Mary Beth's school years were uneventful, and she graduated from Duanesburg High School in 1961. Afterwards, she took low-paying jobs until she became a nursing assistant at Ellis Hospital in Schenectady. In 1963, she met Joseph Tinning on a blind date, and they married in 1965. Their first child, Barbara, was born in 1967, followed by Joseph Jr. in 1970. In 1971, her father died of a heart attack. 3 months later, Mary Beth's third child, Jennifer, was born with severe complications and also died within a week. The tragedies continued with Joseph Jr., who died of a seizure at age 2, and Barbara, who died of Reye syndrome at 5. The deaths of Timothy, Nathan, and Mary Frances followed, attributed to various causes of cardiac arrest. Despite adopting Michael, tragedy struck again when he also died. Suspicion began to grow. The birth of Tammy Lynn in 1985 brought brief hope, but she died of suffocation in December. Authorities, led by Betsy Mannix from Social Services and Bob Imfeld from the Schenectady Police, finally investigated the Tinning household. Tests confirmed Tammy Lynn's death by asphyxia, leading to Mary Beth's arrest. The trial in June 1987 captivated the nation. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including testimonies from pediatrician Dr. Bradley Ford and medical examiner Thomas Oram, who confirmed Tammy Lynn's smothering. The jury found Mary Beth guilty of second-degree murder after 6 weeks of trial and 23 hours of deliberation. Experts speculate Mary Beth might have had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness for attention. She never received a formal diagnosis. In prison, she faced a harsh routine and the dislike of fellow inmates. In March 2007, Mary Beth told the parole board she remembered her daughter's death but denied causing it. In 2009, she spoke of bad times but was found to lack true remorse. In 2011, she admitted to just doing it after losing her other children. Yet again, her parole was denied. Similar outcomes followed in 2013 and 2015. After 6 parole denials, Mary Beth was finally released on August 21, 2018 at age 76, after serving 31 years. Her husband, Joseph, remained by her side. As part of her parole conditions, Mary Beth was to remain under supervision for life, adhere to a curfew, and attend domestic violence counseling. Just like the case of Mary Beth Tinning, this next story isn't any different. Diane Downs. In the American prison system, one name instills fear: Elizabeth Diane Downs. Her tale begins in Phoenix, Arizona, born on August 7, 1955, to Wesley and Willardine Fredrickson. Diane's upbringing was strict, dominated by her father Wesley's authoritarian presence. Feeling neglected, she rebelled, leading to a strained relationship with her parents. Diane found solace in Steve Downs, whom she met in high school. Ignoring her parents' disapproval, she married Steve in 1973, seeking to escape her family. They had 3 children: Christy Ann in 1974, Cheryl Lynn in 1976, and Stephen Daniel in 1979, the latter fathered by a friend, Mark Sager. During Diane's extramarital affair, the marriage was rocky, plagued by financial problems and infidelity, leading to their divorce in 1980. Diane's disturbing behavior toward her children worried Steve. He recalled their daughter Cheryl asking about a gun, expressing a desire to die because Diane had labeled her bad. On May 19, 1983, Diane's life took a dark turn. She arrived at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital with her 3 children who had been shot. Cheryl was dead, Christy had a stroke, and Danny was paralyzed. Diane herself had a gunshot wound. She claimed a carjacker had attacked them, but investigators doubted her story. Forensic evidence didn't support her account, and her calm reaction was suspicious. The investigation revealed Diane owned a .22 caliber handgun, matching the weapon used in the shooting. Witnesses saw her car driving slowly towards the hospital, contradicting her claim of rushing for help. 9 months later, on February 28, 1984, Diane was arrested and charged with murder, attempted murder, and assault. The prosecution argued she wanted to eliminate her children to be with her lover, Robert Knickerbocker, who didn't want kids. During the trial, the most damning testimony came from her daughter Christy, who confirmed Diane shot them. On June 17, 1984, Diane was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life plus 50 years. The judge intended for her never to be free again. In prison, Diane showed no remorse, continuing to weave stories of innocence and blaming various fictional attackers. Diagnosed with personality disorders, she remained detached from reality. Her most shocking act came on July 11, 1987, when she escaped from prison, sparking a massive manhunt. She was recaptured 10 days later and found with 2 other escapees, adding 5 years to her sentence and leading to her transfer to a higher security facility in New Jersey. Next up is most dangerous woman in Britain, Joanne Dennehy. Meet Joanna Christine Dennehy, the most dangerous woman in Britain. Born in August 1982 in St Albans, Hertfordshire, Dennehy's violent tendencies began to surface. Unstable relationships led her to Kevin Lee, a property developer and landlord, and into a deadly attraction. She also befriended Łukasz Slaboszewski, a Polish national who shared her substance abuse habits, and John Chapman, her housemate. Both men would become victims of her growing bloodlust. In March 2013, Dennehy embarked on what became known as the Peterborough Ditch Murders. Her first victim was Łukasz Slaboszewski, last seen alive between March 19 and 29. Dennehy's next victims were her lover and landlord, Kevin Lee, and her housemate, John Chapman. On March 29th, Dennehy killed both Lee and Chapman. Lee's body, dressed post-mortem in a black sequined dress, was found near Newborough the next day. The bodies of Slaboszewski and Chapman were found on April 3rd near Thorney, both bearing fatal stab wounds. Dennehy's killing spree did not end there. She and her friend Gary Stretch drove to Hereford, where she randomly attacked and stabbed 2 men, both dog walkers, who miraculously survived. She even stole the second man's dog. Dennehy was captured shortly after the attacks in Hereford, ending her reign of terror. On November 18, 2013, Joanna Christine Dennehy stood before the judge at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to the murders of 3 men and the attempted murder of 2 others. Throughout the trial, Dennehy's behavior was defiant and mocking, laughing during proceedings and interrupting to assert her autonomy. Dennehy was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, joining a handful of women in the UK with such a sentence, including Myra Hindley and Rosemary West. Her accomplices, Gary Stretch and Leslie Layton, also faced justice. Life in prison for Dennehy has been rough. While in detention at HM Prison Bronzefield, she was involved in a harrowing escape plot, which included plans to murder a prison officer and sever a finger to bypass biometric security. This led to her being placed in solitary confinement from September 2013 to September 2015. Her claims of human rights violations were dismissed by the High Court of Justice. Despite being behind bars, Joanna Christine Dennehy continues to instill fear and command attention, just like this next case of the most notorious serial killer in the US. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, often called the most feared woman in prison, lived a life filled with violence, rebellion, and infamy. Born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan, Aileen's early years were filled with rejection and abuse. Her mother, a 14-year-old girl, married an 18-year-old man with a violent criminal past. Before Aileen could remember him, her father was imprisoned for crimes against children, casting a shadow over her life from the start. Aileen's childhood was marked by abandonment and abuse. Her mother left her and her brother with with their alcoholic grandparents who neglected and abused them. By age 11, Aileen was forced into prostitution to survive, exchanging her body for basic necessities like food and substances. The streets were unforgiving, and Aileen encountered men who exploited her vulnerability. In 1986, Aileen met Tyria Moore, and their volatile relationship was sustained by Aileen's work as a prostitute. By 1989, Aileen's life of desperation turned to one of cold-blooded killing. The highways of Florida became her hunting ground. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner. In November 1989, he picked up Aileen, but their encounter ended with his death. She claimed self-defense, stating Mallory had tried to rape her, but the jury was unconvinced. In 1990, the body count rose. In May, the remains of David Spears, a 43-year-old construction worker, were found riddled with bullets. In June, Charles Cascadden, a 56-year-old rodeo worker, was shot 9 times. Peter Seams, a 65-year-old retired seaman, went missing in June, and although his body was never found, Aileen was linked to his disappearance. Troy Burris, a 50-year-old sausage salesman, was found in July with 2 gunshot wounds. Charles Humphreys, a 56-year-old child abuse investigator, was discovered in September and shot 6 times. The final known victim was Walter Gino Antonio, a 62-year-old trucker whose nearly nude body was found in November, bringing her known victim count to 7. Aileen's method was chillingly consistent. She would shoot her victims multiple times, strip their bodies, and steal their cars and belongings. Her motives were a complex mix of survival, anger, and a twisted sense of retribution for the wrongs she had endured. Aileen's arrest came in January 1991 at a biker bar. Overwhelming evidence, including her fingerprints on the victims' belongings, sealed her fate. Her trial in 1992 was a media spectacle. Aileen's defense of self-defense claims failed, as the prosecution painted her as a cold-blooded killer. She was found guilty of first-degree murder for Richard Mallory's death, and later pleaded no contest to 3 other murders, receiving multiple death sentences. Psychologists diagnosed Aileen with borderline and antisocial personality disorders, shedding light on her lack of empathy and violent outbursts. Aileen's time on death row was marked by psychological turmoil and controversy. She made claims of mistreatment and believed her mind was being controlled. As her execution date approached, her final statements were a mix of defiance and cryptic messages. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Next up is the woman who was deemed too dangerous to be released: Katherine Knight. In the small town of Tenterfield, New South Wales, Katherine Mary Knight was born on October 24, 1955. Her early life was steeped in chaos, setting the stage for a future that would shock the nation. Katherine's mother, Barbara Rukan, left her first husband to live with Ken Knight, a scandalous affair that forced them to move to Moree. Barbara's sons from her first marriage later joined them, adding to the troubling household. Ken Knight, Katherine's father, was an abusive man, known for his violent outbursts and sexual abuse of Barbara, which she recounted in explicit detail to her children. When the family returned to Aberdeen, Katherine's difficult upbringing continued. She claimed to have been sexually assaulted by family members until she was 11, allegations largely confirmed by family and accepted by psychiatrists. At Muswellbrook High School, Katherine was a bully and loner, known for violent outbursts. She once attacked a boy with a weapon and was injured by a teacher in self-defense. Despite this, she could be well-behaved and earned accolades. Katherine left school at 15, unable to read or write, and worked in a clothing factory. A year later, she found her dream job at a local abattoir, where she became a boner and kept her butcher knives hanging above her bed, a habit she maintained until her incarceration. Katherine's personal life was troubling, marked by violent relationships and struggles with mental health. Her marriage to David Kellett was marked by domestic violence, with Katherine attempting to strangle him on their wedding night and fracturing his skull with a frying pan while pregnant. She struggled with postnatal depression, leading to dangerous behavior and psychiatric hospitalizations. Her subsequent relationship with David Saunders was also violent, with Katherine attacking him and killing his dog in a fit of jealousy. The relationship ended with a restraining order against Saunders. Katherine's next relationship was with John Chillingworth, with whom she had a son. However, she left Chillingworth for John Price in 1995. Price was aware of her violent reputation, but their relationship initially seemed happy. This changed when Price refused to marry her. Katherine retaliated by filming stolen items from his workplace, leading to his dismissal. In February 2000, after Katherine assaulted him with a butcher's knife, Price took out a restraining order. Tragically, on February 29th, he told co-workers that if he didn't show up for work, it was because Katherine had killed him. That night, Katherine arrived at Price's house, and after a night together, she brutally murdered him, stabbing him at least 37 times. She then skinned him, hung his hide from a meat hook, decapitated him, and cooked parts of his body to serve to his children. Katherine was found in a drugged stupor and arrested. Her trial became one of the most harrowing in Australian history. She initially pled guilty to manslaughter, but the charge was upgraded to murder. On November 8th, Justice Barry O'Keefe sentenced her to life in prison without parole, marking her papers never to be released, making her the first woman in Australia to receive this sentence. The next story is about a woman whose crimes shocked the entire community of 25 Cromwell Street. Rosemary West. In the dim corners of HM Prison New Hall, a name strikes fear into the hearts of many. Rosemary Pauline Rose West. Her story starts in Northam, Devon, where she was born in November 1953. Rose's early life was troubling. Her mother struggled with mental health issues, undergoing electroconvulsive therapy, while her father was violent, leaving deep psychological scars on Rose. Growing up, Rose faced increasing dysfunction at home. Her father's abusive behavior blurred the lines of care and misconduct, shaping Rose's twisted understanding of love and relationships. By the time she was 15, she met Fred West, a man 12 years her senior, at a bus stop in Cheltenham. Despite initial reservations, Rose was drawn to Fred, who offered an escape from her troubled home. Fred, already a father, brought Rose into his life as a nanny to his children. Rose's parents, alarmed by this relationship, reported her to social services, alleging her involvement in prostitution. Despite their efforts, Rose remained with Fred. In 1972, Fred and Rose married in a secretive ceremony, marking the beginning of their notorious partnership. They settled at 25 Cromwell Street, a place that would become infamous. Rose juggled her role as wife and mother with her work as a prostitute, encouraged by Fred. He installed peepholes and a baby monitor to spy on her sessions with clients, using the money she earned to fund their wicked lifestyle. Their children suffered the most, especially Charmaine, Fred's daughter from a previous marriage. Rose killed Charmaine and lied about her whereabouts for years. The West's house of horrors extended beyond their family, as they lured young women to their homes, where they faced unimaginable torture and death. The couple's crimes continued unchecked for years, with victims disappearing without a trace. Eventually, police discovered the remains of their victims buried in the garden and under the house. Personal belongings of these missing women were also found in their homes, linking Rose and Fred to the murders. In October 1995, Rose West went on trial, drawing global attention. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including testimonies from surviving victims and Fred's confessions before his prison suicide. They depicted Rose as an active participant in the murders, a claim supported by Fred's statements. Rose's defense was one of denial, portraying herself as another victim of Fred's violence. Her lawyers tried to shift all blame onto Fred, but the prosecution's case was strong. Found guilty on all counts, Rose West was sentenced to life imprisonment. Her legacy as one of Britain's most reviled criminals was sealed. Inside HM Prison New Hall, Rose's notorious reputation follows her. Inmates and guards alike treat her with a mix of fear and curiosity. Finally, the woman who brought terror to Veterans Affairs Medical Center. Kristen Gilbert. Within the walls of the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, in Fort Worth, Texas, resides a woman, Kristen Heather Gilbert. Born on a crisp autumn day in November 1967, Kristen Heather Strickland entered the world in Fall River, Massachusetts. She was the firstborn to Richard, an electronics executive, and Claudia, a homemaker and part-time teacher. Kristen's life seemed ordinary, but troubling patterns began to emerge. As a teenager, she became known for lying and manipulative behavior, including fake suicide attempts that hinted at darker tendencies. After graduating from Groton Dunstable Regional High School, Kristen pursued a nursing career at Bridgewater State College. A faked suicide attempt led to psychiatric treatment and a transfer to Mount Wachusett Community College, then Greenfield Community College, where she earned her nursing diploma in 1988. That same year, Kristen married Glenn Gilbert and started a new chapter. Kristen's professional journey began in 1989 at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton. Initially, she seemed like a promising nurse, even appearing in the VA Practitioner magazine in April 1990. But soon, colleagues noticed an unusually high number of deaths during her shifts. In 1996, the Veterans Affairs Medical Center saw a disturbing rise in patient deaths, particularly during cardiac arrests. Epinephrine, a life-saving drug, was disappearing at an alarming rate. Suspicion fell on Kristen Gilbert, whose presence during these emergencies was too consistent to ignore. An investigation was launched. As the hospital investigated, Gilbert tried to disrupt the inquiry by calling in a bomb threat. However, this reckless act only drew more attention to her. Authorities traced the call back to her, and the investigation intensified. Evidence mounted. Colleagues testified about Gilbert's behavior, and records showed a clear link between her shifts and the mortality rate. The misuse of epinephrine became undeniable. Kristen Gilbert's trial drew intense public interest. Assistant U.S. Attorney William M. Welch, too, led the prosecution, presenting a careful case. They showed a timeline of deaths at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center that matched Gilbert's shifts. Witnesses described how she thrived in the chaos of resuscitation attempts. Statistical analysis suggested that the likelihood of her innocence was 1 in 100 million. The prosecution portrayed her as someone who craved attention and control, using her medical knowledge to create life-threatening situations she could then heroically resolve. Defense attorney David P. Hoose argued there was no direct evidence linking Gilbert to the injections and suggested the deaths could be due to patients' pre-existing conditions. However, the jury was not convinced. Gilbert was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole plus 20 years. For more thrilling content, click on the boxes playing on your screen to watch similar content.